Today is the anniversary of Yakuza slash Like a Dragon, so I thought, you know what, let's do a little something. A little appreciation video for the original Yakuza, and just me yapping about the start of my journey with this series. There is something that, I gotta say, not many of my viewers know, and that is the fact that I adore Yakuza.
Nice.
I grew up with this franchise, and as many already know, the original Yakuza 1 was my first venture into the franchise. This would have been roughly around 2006, where I was 9 years old, and it may be embarrassing to talk about how I was invested when I was at that age, but maybe it's not all that bad when I consider that I was able to recognize cinema that young. 2006 was near the end of the PlayStation 2's life cycle, but that meant that there were so many games to play around that time that it could make your head spin just trying to browse all the options and finding something that speaks to you. There was an insane amount of incredible games that were pushed out, and some of them would go on to revolutionize a genre and act as a major reference for many games that would come way after them. One such example is Resident Evil 4. This game was pretty much unlike anything else at the time. Many would say it's the game that made over-the-shoulder gameplay take off as much as it did. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas is another game that many remember fondly. The scale of that game, the story, and the amount of optional side content kept people playing for many hours. Another game series that was very unique is Devil May Cry. I have a personal fondness for the very first game as it had a very isolated and creepy atmosphere that I feel wasn't replicated again in later games, or at least not to the same extent. It's actually amazing how they pulled that off considering you play as a badass demon hunter. But setting all that aside, the bottom line is that the PS2 was full of great games that people would argue hold up very well even today. Yakuza's origins with the first game had something that stood out to me. I can't quite put my finger on it even now, but it was unlike a lot of other games at the time. One of the most common comparisons people used to throw is that it's like GTA, but I was drawn to Yakuza in a way that far surpasses any GTA game. Like, sure, you had a city to walk around, you could go into some shops to buy stuff, you could beat people up, but not just anybody. It's all in self-defense in Yakuza's case. You can't just go around and set people on fire for no reason. GTA technically had hand-to-hand combat, but it was not meant to be relied on. Unlike Yakuza, where it's much more stylized and is the primary way of fighting enemies. There's many more differences, but you get the gist by now. Yakuza 1 had a very good way of setting up this heavy atmosphere as you're wandering around the town, and the pseudo-fixed camera angles added to that feel as well. The sound design of the city bustling and people walking around made Kamurocho feel very much lived in. Like there's many others just going about their daily business and you're just one person passing by amidst all these ongoings. The speech bubbles popping up as you pass by people, showing you what the many individuals living in this town go through, is a very neat addition that serves to liven up the city even more. These may change as you progress through the story as well, which is great. The way Yakuza 1 handled its side quests made it feel like coming across the denizens of Kamurocho was less of a programmed thing and more of a natural thing that would just randomly happen by chance when you walk by there at a certain time. And this is not even an exaggeration. Yakuza 1's side quests worked in a way where they could only be triggered at specific points per chapter, so you could miss them if you didn't do them as they popped up. Now, I'll say this mechanic did not age well, like at all. At least, not for me. This would mean you could miss out on a boatload of items that you didn't even know existed in the game. Legitimately, good luck trying to figure out each and every sub-story in each and every part of the game and each chapter of the game. You'd probably have to go hunt all the pixels in Kamurocho to make sure nothing was missed. Doing all the sub-stories without a guide is probably a torture method used somewhere in the world.
Oh, hell no!
I will say this though, this kind of design makes for a sort of personalized experience. Picture this with me. You play Yakuza 1 and you also have a friend who plays Yakuza 1, both at the same time. It goes without saying that you two will take different paths playing through the game. Your friend will talk to you about how they had this sub-story where a drunkard and a lady tried to scam them, and then you'll be like, whoa, what the heck, I didn't see that. And then you tell them about a sub-story where you get scammed and they'll be like, oh yeah, I saw like 50 of these. Seriously. Yakuza 1 has an insane amount of sub-stories where the whole thing going for them is just you getting scammed. And the only difference is in the method, which, in hindsight, that sort of takes creativity, but a lot of them do just feel the same. Yakuza 1, despite being the very first game in the franchise, gave a bunch of sub-stories fully animated cutscenes, which was just insane to me at the time, and even now thinking about it. This made the sub-stories feel less like sub-stories and more like something that could have been put as a filler in the main story. Sadly, the tradition of having fully animated cutscenes like this was dropped starting with Yakuza 5. Yes, I'll take every chance to dunk on Yakuza 5. Lovingly, of course. Okay, I'm sorry. Did you hear that loser just now? How dare he diss Peak? In fact, why are you even still subscribed to this loser? One of my favorite examples is in Yakuza 3 with the sub-story where Rikiya gets to finish his Viper tattoo by the hands of the same guy who inked Kiryu's tattoo. This being in a cutscene made the bond shared between Kiryu and Rikiya feel that much more alive and real. They could have done it in just text box format, but the cutscene format just gives it a great deal of significance in comparison, like it could be part of the actual story. But back to Yakuza 1, I'm actually quite fond of how the street encounters work in this game. There are fixed spawns where enemies can show up in, so that means if you're revisiting the game, you can easily avoid them for the most part. And it's not that difficult to spot them either. But on the topic of random encounters, I'm not gonna let this conversation end without bringing up my first love of a soundtrack in Yakuza. Funk Goes On. This track is amazing. It would go on to become iconic and one of the defining traits of Kiryu and the series itself. In a game called Project X Zone 2, where Kiryu and Majima were brought as guest characters, they've created a neat remix of Funk Goes On to represent the franchise, and I love that they chose this track. There is one aspect of Yakuza 1's random encounters that I don't like, though it's a very minor one. Throughout the story, you'll have scripted story encounters that are very hard to avoid. They detect you basically the moment you walk into a camera angle and are just faster than normal encounters. And when you're in a narrow area, you're probably just gonna have to suck it up and go in. The heat actions of Yakuza 1, given that it's the first game, were relatively simple and straight to the point. Though to this day, there is one huge favorite of mine that originates from this game. The later games would go on to call it the Essence of Wreckage. Assuming you already have the floor heat action unlocked, your HP bar has to be flashing first and then you'll be able to do it. And when you do it, you'll be met with this super badass angle of Kiryu punching the ever-living crap out of the enemy. The best part about it by far is that it can be done pretty much infinitely, assuming you can keep up with the rising speed requirement. Or at least, that's what I got a feel for after playing this game so many times. So what that means is, the more time you spend doing the heat action, the faster you'll need to press. But this means that technically, you can start doing this on a boss when they have almost full HP, and just watch their health drain using this single heat action. It's not likely to happen given how insanely fast you have to be, but even just seeing a huge chunk of health being taken away by it is still insanely satisfying. One of the most satisfying things you can do in the franchise for me. Couple that with the crisp punch sound effects and it's just... There are so many tracks in this game that are great to listen to. I mentioned Funk Goes On already, but then you have Scarlet Scar, End of Drama, ID, Son of a Gun, Intelligence for Violence, Turning Point, For Whose Sake, and man, the soundtrack is just so good. I have to give a very special shout out to one thing that Yakuza 1 does very well, the training. In many of the other games, you have to go through tedious processes in order to be able to obtain some of the handy and powerful moves that Komaki or anyone else can teach you. A special shout out to Yakuza 2 for that. In Yakuza 1 though, after the point where you fight in the Coliseum, you can go talk to Komaki right after, and he'll start teaching you what he has to offer. From there, every time you finish a session, he'll tell you to go out and practice those moves. And sometimes you'll need a certain level in one of the skills to become eligible. What this means is, compared to most other games, you can get all the Komaki moves extremely organically. Every time you have to come back to Purgatory for story reasons, just check in with Komaki and see if you're ready to get the next move. It does not waste your time with this, and that's something I'm coming to appreciate more and more as the years go on. Yakuza 1 is the pioneer for what we know nowadays as Ultimate Battles, or Climax Battles, or the Gauntlet. In this game, it was called Battle Review. And believe it or not, this may be the most expanded version of this mode that we've ever gotten even by today's standards. You have 6 categories of challenges: Time Attack, Consecutive Battle, Trial Battle, Theme Battle, Revenge, and Ultimate Battle. Time Attack is self-explanatory, you just have to beat certain fights as fast as you can. Consecutive Battle has a set of challenges where they throw you into fights that can happen between, say, Chapter 1 to 4. They include some of the major sub-story fights, which I find really interesting. Trial Battle is a set of fights with very specific conditions. Theme Battle is a set of fights against a specific group of people, like say, civilians for one challenge. Ultimate Battle is basically everything, the back-to-back boss fights as we know them. This is DevilLeon7 from the future, and I have a very important announcement. I forgot to talk about Revenge Battles, so here I am now. What do you mean, wash the Leon 7? Shut up! Revenge Battles are basically just boss fights from the story, but there's also a special last one where you fight against Komaki, and he is an absolute menace unless you're good with counters. In all of these categories, the challenges differ greatly. So there's several, let's call them Kiryu types. You have Sleeping Dragon, which is Kiryu at his weakest. You have Heat Dragon, where most of the skills unlocked are under the Heat category. You have Mighty Dragon, where most of the skills unlocked are under the Body category. You have the Dragon of Dojima, where it's similar to Mighty Dragon in that it has body upgrades most, but it's actually slightly weaker. And then you have Legendary Dragon, where you have everything maxed out. Each of these Kiryu types has an assigned outfit too. Sleeping Dragon has the prison outfit, Heat Dragon has the black funeral suit, Mighty Dragon has the original suit, Dragon of Dojima shares the same outfit as Mighty Dragon, and Legendary Dragon has shirtless Kiryu. There's a lot to appreciate about Battle Review, but I'm also not gonna say that it's better than it really is. There's a lot of really annoying challenges here. And if that's not bad enough on its own with how clunky the combat is, all these challenges are ranked, and each and every one of them has different criteria for the rankings. Sometimes it's taking as little damage as possible, sometimes it's finishing the fights as quickly as possible, and so on. If you thought any of the later games had insanely unfun climax battles, you haven't seen Yakuza 1's. This is made for people who lock themselves away from society and spend hundreds of hours practicing. They have stuff like a bunch of no damage challenges here that may really test your patience. And take my word for it, with Yakuza 1's combat, these just aren't worth it. This is coming from like the biggest Yakuza 1 enjoyer, by the way. Like, where many people find the combat to have aged horribly with this game, I personally still enjoy it a lot when I'm just revisiting the story, but I would not put myself through finishing all these challenges at the highest rank. You may wonder what you even get out of all this trouble, and it's basically infinite heat in the story as far as I looked up. But getting S rank in all of the challenges for just that is probably something I would avoid, for my mental well-being and just because that's not freaking worth it at all. I love Yakuza, but I'd rather spend all that time with something else. On that note, there might be a bunch of other things that I can think of when it comes to why I adore Yakuza 1 so much, but maybe we'll save the rest for another day. I want this video to just be a nice little one. This is a game that I pretty much never tire of coming back to. It's an absolute pleasure to revisit. It has great soundtrack, the gameplay is still enjoyable, and the dub is the best thing ever.
Fucking traitor.
Yakuza 1 is a game that I feel a lot of gratitude to because I'm literally here thanks to it, and also my dad. I haven't mentioned that, have I? Some of you might already know about this story, but I legitimately don't know if I would have gotten to where I am now if not for my dad. Many years ago, he bought a PlayStation 2 for my brothers and I, and one of the games he happened to buy was Yakuza 1. That's how I played it, loved it, and that's also how Devil Leon 8 spawned. Seeing as it's the anniversary of the franchise, I just want to wish it the best, and I hope that going forward, we keep getting games that are enjoyable and bring something new to the table. I want to thank all of you for indulging me and listening to all of this rambling about an old game, but it is one that has a special place in my heart. I'd like to thank you all once again for just choosing to give this video and channel the time of your day. I hope you enjoyed listening to what I had to say, and as always, I'm grateful that you're continuing to watch my content, so thank you. That's gonna be it for this video. Now you guys stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you, hopefully very soon. Bye-bye now.